I found the sugar in my excavator's fuel tank on a Tuesday morning, and that was when I knew the Meadowbrook Glen Homeowners Association had officially gone from annoying to criminal. My name is Derek Ingram, and I had been living in this upscale Sacramento neighborhood for 3 years before I decided to build an addition onto my house. My wife Jennifer and I were expecting our second child, and our 2,400 square foot home suddenly felt cramped. We needed a proper nursery, a playroom, and maybe even a home office where I could actually work without stepping on toy trucks. The plans were approved by the city, the permits were filed correctly, and I had hired Thompson Brothers Construction, one of the most reputable contractors in the area. Everything was going smoothly until the HOA got involved. The Meadowbrook Glen HOA was run by a woman named Patricia Morrison, a 52-year-old real estate agent who treated the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. She had been HOA president for 7 years, and during that time, she had fined residents for everything from having the wrong shade of beige on their mailboxes to parking their cars in their own driveways for more than 30 minutes while unloading groceries. I had always paid my dues on time and kept my head down, but apparently, construction was her trigger. The first inspection happened on a Monday morning in early March. I was at work when my contractor, Mike Thompson, called me around 10 in the morning. "Derek, you need to know that the HOA lady just showed up on site," Mike said, sounding irritated. "She is demanding to see all our permits and asking about every single detail of the construction." "Did you show her the permits?" I asked, already feeling my blood pressure rising. "Of course I did. Everything is completely legitimate, but she is taking pictures of everything, measuring things and writing stuff down in this little notebook. She is acting like we are building a nuclear reactor instead of a 20 by 30-foot addition." I sighed. "Just be polite and let her do whatever she needs to do. We have nothing to hide." That night, I received an email from Patricia Morrison with a list of 17 alleged violations. The list included things like the dumpster being 3 inches too far to the left, the portable toilet being visible from the street, and the construction materials not being covered with the appropriate tarps. Each violation carried a $50 fine, and she expected immediate compliance. I spent that evening going through my HOA bylaws with a fine-tooth comb. According to the rules, the HOA did have the right to inspect construction projects to ensure compliance with architectural guidelines. But most of Patricia's complaints were either completely made up or based on her personal interpretation of vague language. I drafted a polite but firm response, explaining that we were in full compliance and that I would be happy to discuss any legitimate concerns at the next HOA meeting. Her response came within an hour. "Compliance is not negotiable. Further violations will result in legal action." The next day, Mike called me again, this time around noon. "Derek, she is back. She showed up with another woman and they are both walking around the site, pointing at things and taking more pictures." "Who is the other woman?" "I don't know. Looks like another HOA member." "They are both wearing matching jackets with the HOA logo on them." I left work early and drove to the house. When I arrived, Patricia and her companion, a thin woman named Linda Shelton who served as the HOA secretary, were standing near the foundation, examining the rebar placement. "Can I help you ladies?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Patricia turned to me with that practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "Derek, we are just conducting our routine inspection." As HOA president, it is my responsibility to ensure that all construction projects meet our community standards. "I appreciate your diligence," I said, "but Mike and his crew are professionals, and we have all the necessary permits from the city. If you have specific concerns, I would be happy to address them. Well, for starters, the noise levels during construction hours are excessive, Linda said, consulting her clipboard. We have received complaints from neighbors. Construction is happening between 8 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon, which is within city regulations, I replied. And I personally spoke to all my immediate neighbors before we started. Nobody had any issues. Patricia crossed her arms. The regulations are clear, Derek. We are simply doing our jobs. They stayed for another 20 minutes, and I watched them carefully. Something about their behavior seemed off. They were not just observing, they were looking for problems that did not exist, measuring things that did not need measuring and whispering to each other while taking notes. After they left, Mike pulled me aside. I have been doing this for 20 years, and I have never seen HOA members this involved in a construction project. What is their problem? I wish I knew, I said. The incidents escalated over the next 2 weeks. Patricia showed up almost daily, sometimes alone, sometimes with Linda or other HOA board members. Each visit resulted in a new list of supposed violations and more fines. I was now up to $1,850 in fines that I had no intention of paying since none of them were legitimate. Then the equipment problem started. On a Thursday morning in late March, Mike called me before 7 in the morning. Derek, we have a serious problem. The excavator would not start this morning. My mechanic just looked at it and someone put sugar in the fuel tank. I felt my stomach drop. What? Are you sure? Completely sure. This was deliberate sabotage. The fuel system is completely destroyed. We are going to need to replace the entire thing, and the excavator is going to be out of commission for at least a week. Do you have any idea who might have done it? The site was locked up last night. Whoever did this either had keys to the gate or climbed over the fence. I immediately called the police and filed a report. 2 officers came out, took statements, and photographed the excavator, but they were honest about the likelihood of finding the culprit. Unless you have security cameras or witnesses, these cases are really hard to solve, Officer Ramirez told me. I did not have cameras yet, but I ordered a complete security system that day. 4 wireless cameras with night vision and motion detection, all connected to my phone. The system arrived on Saturday, and I spent the entire day installing them around the construction site, making sure they covered every angle. The following Monday, Patricia showed up for another inspection. I watched her on the camera feed from my office, noting how thoroughly she examined everything. She spent 15 minutes looking at the excavator, which was still non-functional and waiting for parts. She took pictures from multiple angles, then moved on to the other equipment. On Tuesday morning, Mike called me at 6:30. Derek, you are not going to believe this. Someone slashed the tires on the cement mixer truck overnight. I have cameras now, I said immediately. Let me check the footage. I pulled up the app on my phone and scrolled through the previous night's recordings. At 2:17 in the morning, the motion sensors had activated. 2 figures appeared on screen, both wearing dark clothing and baseball caps. They moved quickly and deliberately, going straight to the cement mixer. One of them pulled out a knife and systematically punctured all 4 tires while the other stood watch. The quality was not good enough to see faces clearly, but I could make out general builds and heights. One was a woman, medium height, stocky build. The other was taller, possibly a man, thin build. I called the police again, this time with actual evidence. Officer Ramirez came back out along with a detective named Sarah Chen. They reviewed the footage carefully. This is definitely criminal mischief, possibly felony level depending on the total damage amount, Detective Chen said. Do you have any suspects? I think it might be the HOA president and some of her board members, I said. They have been harassing us since the construction started." Detective Chen raised an eyebrow. "That is a serious accusation. What makes you think they are involved?" I showed her the timeline of events, the escalating fines, the constant inspections, and the pattern of equipment failures that always seem to happen after HOA visits. She took notes and asked for contact information for Patricia Morrison and the other board members. "I will look into this," she said. "In the meantime, keep those cameras running and document everything." Over the next week, I became obsessed with the camera footage. I watched every inspection, every visit from Patricia and her associates. I noticed patterns. Patricia always spent extra time near the equipment. She would walk around vehicles multiple times, sometimes touching them, sometimes just looking. Linda often acted as a lookout, positioning herself where she could see anyone approaching. On Thursday afternoon, Patricia arrived for an unscheduled inspection. I happened to be home, working in my actual office, and I watched her on the cameras. She spent 10 minutes examining the new excavator that had finally been delivered. She walked completely around it 3 times, paused near the fuel cap, looked around, then bent down near the engine compartment. Something in her body language made me suspicious. I saved the video clip and watched it again in slow motion. When she bent down, her hand moved towards something, then she quickly stood up and walked away. I called Mike. "Can you go check the new excavator? I think Patricia just did something to it." Mike was on site within minutes. He inspected the excavator thoroughly and found that someone had loosened the oil drain plug. If we had started this thing, all the oil would have drained out and the engine would have seized. That is another $10,000 in damage. "I have her on video," I said. That evening, I went back through all my saved footage, compiling every suspicious moment. I created a timeline document matching equipment failures with HOA inspection dates. The pattern was undeniable. Every single incident of sabotage occurred within 24 hours of an HOA inspection. I sent everything to Detective Chen on Friday morning. She called me back that afternoon. "This is compelling evidence," she said. "I need you to send me a formal statement and all the video files. I am going to bring this to the district attorney. What happens now? We investigate. If we can establish probable cause, we will get warrants. But I need you to understand that this is going to take time. We need to build a solid case. Meanwhile, my construction is at a standstill and I am losing money every day. I understand your frustration. My advice is to increase your security and maybe consider having someone on site overnight." I hired a security guard, a retired police officer named Marcus Webb, who was looking for part-time work. Marcus worked from 10 at night until 6 in the morning, and I paid him $25 an hour. It was expensive, but cheaper than replacing equipment. Patricia showed up on Monday morning for another inspection. Marcus told me she seemed surprised to see him there. "She asked me who I was and why I was there," Marcus said. "I told her I was site security. She said that was unnecessary and that the neighborhood was perfectly safe. Then she did her inspection and left. For 3 nights, nothing happened. Then on Thursday night, Marcus called me at 11:43 p.m. "Derek, you need to get down here right now. I just caught someone trying to break into the equipment shed." I threw on clothes and drove to the site in record time. When I arrived, Marcus had someone pinned against the fence. It was a man I had never seen before, maybe 30 years old, wearing all black. "He jumped the fence and was trying to break the lock on the shed," Marcus explained. "I grabbed him before he could get in." The police arrived within minutes. The man refused to give his name at first, but a quick search revealed his ID. His name was Brian Morrison, Patricia's son. Brian was arrested and taken to the county jail. Detective Chen called me early the next morning. "This is the break we needed," she said. "Brian Morrison has a criminal record, 2 prior arrests for vandalism and 1 for theft. He is looking at serious charges here, and I am willing to bet he is going to talk." She was right. By Friday afternoon, Brian had accepted a deal with the prosecutor. In exchange for a reduced charge, he agreed to testify against his mother and provide details about all the sabotage incidents. According to Brian's statement, which Detective Chen shared with me, Patricia had orchestrated the entire thing. She was angry that I was building an addition without her approval, even though I did not need her approval, only the city's. In her mind, homeowners needed to clear everything through the HOA first. When I went ahead with the construction anyway, she decided to make an example of me. The sugar in the fuel tank, the slashed tires, the loosened oil plug, and several other incidents I had not even discovered yet were all planned by Patricia and carried out by Brian and Linda Shelton. They thought that if they caused enough delays and expenses, I would abandon the project and other homeowners would be too scared to attempt any construction. On Monday morning, Detective Chen and 4 other officers arrested Patricia Morrison at her home. Linda Shelton was arrested at her workplace. Both were charged with multiple counts of felony vandalism, conspiracy, and criminal mischief. The news spread through Meadowbrook Glen like wildfire. By noon, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts from neighbors. Some were shocked, some were not surprised at all, and many wanted to share their own horror stories about Patricia's behavior over the years. Jennifer and I sat down that evening and talked about everything that had happened. Our construction had been delayed by nearly 6 weeks, and the equipment damage and security costs had added almost $30,000 to our budget. "We should sue her," Jennifer said. "She cost us a fortune and put us through hell." "We will," I said. "But first, I want to see what happens with the criminal case." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for mid-May. I was called as a witness and spent 2 hours on the stand, walking the judge through the timeline of events and explaining the video evidence. Brian Morrison testified as well, providing detailed accounts of each sabotage incident. His testimony was damning. He explained how his mother had planned everything, how she had obtained a copy of the site access keys from the contractor's truck during an inspection, and how she had personally directed each act of vandalism. Linda Shelton's attorney tried to argue that she was simply following Patricia's lead and did not fully understand the consequences of their actions. The prosecutor was not buying it. "Miss Shelton is a 50-year-old woman with a college education and a successful career," the prosecutor argued. "She knew exactly what she was doing when she acted as a lookout while Mr. Morrison slashed tires and sabotaged equipment. This was a coordinated criminal conspiracy." The judge agreed. Both Patricia and Linda were bound over for trial, with bail set at $50,000 each. Patricia's husband posted her bail immediately. Linda's family took 3 days to come up with the money. While the criminal case moved forward, I filed a civil lawsuit against Patricia Morrison, Linda Shelton, and the Meadowbrook Glen HOA itself. My attorney, David Park, was confident we had a strong case. "The HOA is liable because these actions were taken under the color of official HOA business," David explained. Patricia was conducting these so-called inspections in her capacity as HOA president, which means the HOA itself can be held responsible. The civil case revealed even more disturbing details. During discovery, we obtained HOA meeting minutes and email records. It turned out that Patricia had been discussing her plans with other board members, though most of them claimed they thought she was just talking about increasing fines and enforcement, not actual sabotage. One email, sent from Patricia to the entire board in February, stood out. "We need to send a strong message to Derek Ingram and anyone else who thinks they can do whatever they want in this neighborhood. If we don't stop this now, everyone will be building additions and turning our beautiful community into a construction zone." Another board member, Thomas Reynolds, had responded, "I agree we need to maintain standards, but we have to be careful about overstepping our authority. The city has already approved his permits." Patricia's response, "Let me handle Derek Ingram. I know what I am doing." The criminal trial began in late July. Jennifer was 8 months pregnant by then, and I was worried about the stress affecting her and the baby. But she insisted on attending every day of the trial. The prosecution presented a thorough case. They had the video evidence, Brian's testimony, financial records showing Patricia had paid Brian $500 for each sabotage incident, and testimony from Mike Thompson about the damage and delays. They also brought in an expert witness from the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office, who explained how the sabotage could have resulted in serious injury or death if someone had operated the compromised equipment. Patricia's defense attorney tried to argue that the video footage was not clear enough to definitively identify his client, and that Brian Morrison was an unreliable witness with a criminal record. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts for Patricia Morrison. Guilty on all counts for Linda Shelton. Sentencing was scheduled for September. In the meantime, the civil case moved forward. The HOA's insurance company tried to deny coverage, arguing that criminal acts by board members were not covered under their policy. David Park filed a motion to compel coverage, arguing that the insurance policy covered actions taken under the scope of HOA authority, regardless of whether those actions were criminal. The insurance company eventually settled rather than risk a jury trial. They agreed to pay $150,000 to cover my actual damages, plus legal fees. Patricia and Linda were personally liable for an additional $75,000 in punitive damages, though David warned me that collecting on that judgment might be difficult. "People like Patricia often hide their assets or file for bankruptcy," he explained, "but we will pursue every option." The criminal sentencing hearing in September was packed. At least 30 Meadowbrook Glen residents showed up, and the judge allowed several of them to give victim impact statements. It turned out that Patricia's reign of terror had affected dozens of families over the years. People talked about being fined thousands of dollars for trivial violations, being harassed and threatened, and feeling afraid in their own homes. One woman, elderly Mrs. Carson from 2 streets over, testified about how Patricia had fined her $500 for having yellow roses in her front yard instead of red ones. "I am on a fixed income," Mrs. Carson said, her voice shaking. "I had to choose between paying that fine or buying my blood pressure medication. I paid the fine because I was scared she would put a lien on my house." The judge listened to everything carefully. When it was time to pronounce sentence, he did not mince words. "Miss Morrison, you were entrusted with a position of authority in your community, and you abused that authority in the worst possible way. You did not just violate the law, you terrorized your neighbors and caused significant financial harm to Mr. Ingram and his family. Your actions could have resulted in serious injury or death if someone had operated the sabotaged equipment. I find your conduct to be particularly egregious because it was premeditated, calculated, and carried out over an extended period of time." He sentenced Patricia to 3 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 months. Linda Shelton received 2 years, with the possibility of parole after 1 year. Brian Morrison, who had cooperated with the prosecution, received 1 year in county jail with work release. Patricia's face went white when she heard the sentence. Her attorney immediately filed a notice of appeal, but the judge denied bail pending appeal. She was taken into custody right there in the courtroom. The aftermath was significant for Meadowbrook Glen. The remaining HOA board members all resigned within a week of the sentencing. An emergency election was held, and a complete new board was voted in. One of their first actions was to review and revise all the HOA bylaws, removing vague language that had allowed Patricia to impose ridiculous fines and restrictions. The new board president, a retired attorney named Margaret Walsh, reached out to me personally. On behalf of the Meadowbrook Glen HOA, I want to apologize for everything you went through. What Patricia did was inexcusable, and we are committed to making sure nothing like this ever happens again. She also informed me that the board had voted to waive all the bogus fines Patricia had imposed and to reimburse me for my HOA dues for the entire year. Jennifer gave birth to our daughter, Emma, in early October. By then, the construction was finally complete. Our beautiful new addition included a spacious nursery painted soft yellow, a playroom with built-in shelving for all the toys, and my home office with a door that actually locked. Mike Thompson came by the day we moved furniture into the new rooms. I have been building homes for 2 decades, and I have never seen anything like what happened here, he said. But I have to say, you handled it like a champ. A lot of people would have given up. Giving up was not an option, I said. This is our home, and nobody had the right to sabotage our plans, HOA president or not. The insurance settlement covered most of our additional expenses, though we were still out of pocket about $15,000 after everything was said and done. David Park continued to pursue the personal judgment against Patricia and Linda, and eventually managed to get a lien placed on Patricia's house. It would not pay off immediately, but someday, when she sold or refinanced, we would get our money. Life in Meadowbrook Glen slowly returned to normal. The new HOA board was reasonable and professional, focusing on actual community issues like road maintenance and park upkeep, rather than harassing residents over trivial matters. Several other families who had been planning construction projects moved forward with their plans, and the neighborhood began to feel less like a prison camp and more like an actual community. I ran into Thomas Reynolds, the former board member who had questioned Patricia's tactics, at the grocery store in November. He apologized profusely for not doing more to stop her. I knew she was going too far with the fines and the harassment, but I never imagined she would actually sabotage your equipment, he said. I should have spoken up more forcefully or resigned from the board. You sent that email warning her about overstepping, I reminded him. At least you tried to pump the brakes. Not hard enough, apparently. The following spring, I received a letter from the California Department of Corrections. Patricia Morrison was up for her parole hearing, and victims had the right to submit impact statements. I spent an evening writing out everything that had happened, the financial cost, the emotional stress, the impact on my pregnant wife, and the broader harm to our community. I submitted it to the parole board and waited. In May, I got the notification. Parole denied. Patricia would serve her full sentence. Linda Shelton was released after serving 13 months. According to neighborhood gossip, she moved out of state to live with her sister in Nevada. Brian Morrison was released after 9 months and was last seen working at a construction supply company in Stockton. The irony was not lost on me. 2 years after the whole ordeal began, Jennifer and I were sitting in our backyard, watching our kids play in the grass. Emma was toddling around while our older son, Jake, pushed her on the small swing set we had installed. The addition was working perfectly, giving us the space we needed. "You ever regret building the addition?" Jennifer asked. "After everything we went through," I thought about it. "Not for a second. This is our house, and we had every right to improve it. What I regret is that it took criminal charges and prison time to stop Patricia from terrorizing the whole neighborhood. At least some good came out of it. The new HOA board is actually doing good work." She was right. Margaret Walsh and her team had transformed the HOA from a tool of oppression into an actual community organization. They organized neighborhood events, maintained common areas properly, and treated residents like adults rather than subjects. I also heard through the grapevine that other HOAs in the Sacramento area had reviewed their own policies after the Morrison case made the news. Several had implemented oversight measures and complaint processes to prevent board members from abusing their authority. At least one HOA president had been voted out after residents learned about the case and started questioning their own board's practices. In the end, the whole experience taught me several valuable lessons. First, document everything when dealing with an HOA or any other authority figure. Those security cameras and detailed records were essential to proving what was happening. Second, do not be afraid to stand up for your rights, even when facing people who seem to have power over you. And third, sometimes the system actually works. The police investigated. The prosecutors took the case seriously. The jury delivered the right verdict, and the judge imposed appropriate sentences. Mike Thompson still occasionally sends me referrals. Homeowners in other neighborhoods who are planning construction projects and worried about HOA interference. I always tell them the same thing. Know your rights, follow the rules, document everything, and do not let anyone bully you out of improving your own property. The construction equipment sabotage case became something of a legend in Sacramento area real estate circles. I have been contacted by several news outlets over the years, asking to interview me about the experience. I have done a few interviews, always emphasizing that most HOA board members are decent people trying to maintain their communities, but that positions of power can attract the wrong people if there are not proper checks and balances. Patricia Morrison served 20 months before being released on parole in 2027. By then, her husband had divorced her, and she had lost her real estate license due to the felony convictions. I heard she was working as a cashier at a retail store in Roseville and living in a small apartment. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy. She had destroyed her own life over something so stupid. But mostly, I just felt relief that she would never have power over anyone again. The final chapter in the saga came in late 2027 when David Park called to tell me that Patricia's house had finally sold. After all the legal fees and debts were paid, there was enough left over to satisfy our judgment. A check for $75,000 plus interest arrived in the mail 2 weeks later. Jennifer and I used the money to fully fund both kids' college savings accounts and took the family on a long overdue vacation to Hawaii. As we sat on the beach in Maui, watching the sunset, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The sabotage, the investigation, the trial, the years of waiting for justice. Was it worth it? Jennifer asked, reading my thoughts. Every bit of it, I said. Not just for us, but for everyone else in Meadowbrook Glen who was afraid to stand up to her. Sometimes you have to fight, even when it is hard. Back home in Sacramento, Our house stood as a testament to that fight. The addition that Patricia Morrison tried so hard to stop was now full of life and laughter, exactly as we had planned. And every time I pulled into the driveway and saw those extra rooms, I felt a sense of pride not just in the construction itself, but in the fact that I had not backed down. The Meadowbrook Glen HOA continued to thrive under new leadership. Property values in the neighborhood actually increased once word got out that the toxic leadership had been removed. Several families who had been considering moving away decided to stay. New families moved in, attracted by the reasonable HOA policies and strong sense of community. I eventually joined the HOA board myself, serving a 2-year term as treasurer. I wanted to be part of the solution, helping to ensure that the mistakes of the past would never be repeated. We implemented term limits for board members, created a robust appeal process for fines, and established quarterly town halls where residents could voice concerns directly to the board. One evening during a board meeting, Margaret Walsh brought up the Morrison case. "I think we should do something to formally acknowledge what Derek went through, and how his refusal to back down ultimately benefited the entire community." The board voted to name the neighborhood's new playground, built with funds that had previously been wasted on Patricia's legal expenses and frivolous projects, the Ingram Family Community Play Area. Jennifer cried when they surprised us with the dedication ceremony. Standing there with my family, surrounded by neighbors who had become genuine friends, I realized that the worst experience of my homeownership had ultimately led to something really positive. Meadowbrook Glen was now a real community, not just a collection of houses ruled by fear and arbitrary fines. The construction equipment sabotage case also led to changes at the state level. A California assemblyman from Sacramento introduced legislation requiring HOAs to carry liability insurance and submit to regular audits. The law passed in 2028, inspired in part by the Morrison case and several other similar incidents around the state. As for the equipment itself, Thompson Brothers Construction still uses some of the machines that were sabotaged and repaired. Mike told me he keeps detailed service records on those specific pieces of equipment, and he sometimes tells new employees the story as a cautionary tale about job site security. "Your case changed how we operate," Mike said during a chance encounter at a hardware store in 2028. "We now install cameras on every job site from day one, and we have much better security protocols. It cost us a lot to learn that lesson, but it was necessary." I still drive by the construction site occasionally, even though it has long since been cleaned up and returned to normal. The grass has grown back, the temporary fence is gone, and you would never know that this quiet corner of Meadowbrook Glen was once the scene of a criminal conspiracy. But I know. And more importantly, I know what I am capable of when pushed. I am not a confrontational person by nature. I would rather avoid conflict and find compromise. But when someone threatens my family, my home, or my rights, I will not back down. The HOA learned that lesson the hard way, and I am confident that other HOAs in the region took notice. Years from now, when Emma and Jake are grown and possibly dealing with their own HOA issues, I will tell them this story. I will explain that authority figures are not always right, that systems of power can be corrupted, and that sometimes ordinary people have to stand up and fight for what is fair and just. I will also tell them that justice is possible if you are willing to work for it, document everything, and refuse to be intimidated. The house addition has aged beautifully. The contractor did excellent work, and everything has held up perfectly. Sometimes I sit in my office, looking out at the backyard, and I think about how close we came to abandoning this project. If the sabotage had been more effective, if the cameras had not captured evidence, if the police and prosecutors had not taken it seriously, Patricia Morrison might have won. But she did not win. Justice prevailed. And Meadowbrook Glen became a better place because someone finally said enough. That, in the end, is the real story. Not just about catching an HOA president sabotaging construction equipment, but about standing up to corruption and abuse of power wherever it exists. Whether it is a HOA president, a city official, a corporate executive, or anyone else who thinks their position puts them above the law, they need to learn that ordinary citizens have rights and the determination to defend them. I still live in Meadowbrook Glen, and I plan to stay here for many years to come. This is home. This is where my kids are growing up, where my neighbors have become friends, and where I fought and won a battle against someone who thought she was untouchable. Every time I walk through that addition, every time I see the playground with my family's name on it, every time I attend an HOA meeting where board members actually listen to residents, I am reminded that the fight was worth it. Patricia Morrison tried to make an example of me. Instead, she became an example herself, a cautionary tale about what happens when power goes unchecked and when someone in authority decides they are above the law. Her name is now synonymous in Sacramento area real estate circles with HOA abuse and corruption. Meanwhile, the Ingram family lives peacefully in their expanded home, surrounded by a community that learned important lessons about governance, accountability, and the importance of standing up for what is right. And that construction addition, the one that started this whole mess, remains standing as a monument to the simple truth that nobody, not even an HOA president, has the right to sabotage someone's lawful project just because they do not like it. The security cameras are still installed, though mostly they just record squirrels and the occasional package delivery these days. But they are there, a reminder of why documentation and vigilance matter. And sometimes, late at night when I am working in my office, I pull up those old video files from 2026 and watch Patricia Morrison walking around the construction site, planning her next act of sabotage, never imagining that her every move was being recorded and would eventually lead to her own downfall. Justice is not always swift, and it is not always easy, but when it finally arrives, it is worth the wait and the fight. That is what I learned from the great Meadowbrook Glen construction equipment sabotage case, and that is what I will carry with me for the rest of my life.